Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're digging into the absolute bedrock of any good research project, alignment. You know, it's that secret ingredient that takes a bunch of ideas and turns them into a study that's powerful, credible, and just plain solid. Let's get into why this is so important. I want you to think about your research project like you're building a house. Seriously, does it have a solid foundation? Are the walls straight? Does the roof actually connect to the rest of the structure? Because a study without alignment, well, it's basically a house of cards. It might look okay for a second, but you know it's going to collapse the minute someone looks at it too closely. So here's our construction plan for today. We're going to start with what alignment even is. Then we'll walk through the 5 key stages of building this rock-solid study, from pouring the foundation all the way to that final inspection of your results. Okay, first things first. What exactly is this alignment thing we're talking about? The best way to think about it is like a golden thread that runs through your entire study. You should be able to pick it up at the very beginning and follow it all the way to the very end without any breaks. So the formal definition talks about a logical and consistent connection. And that's really the key. It just means that every single choice you make, from your main question to how you analyze your data, has to make sense with every other choice. In a well-aligned study, nothing is random. Every piece has a purpose. All right, let's get our hands dirty and see how we actually build this alignment. We have to start with the most critical part of any building, right? The foundation. Because if you get this part wrong, everything, and I mean everything you build on top of it, is going to be shaky. And here it is. This is your concrete slab. It's made of 3 things. The research problem, that's your why. The research purpose, that's your what. And the research questions, that's your how. And they have to flow, one into the next, in a perfectly straight line. So here's your first checkpoint. Look at your problem statement and ask yourself honestly, is it crystal clear why this study even needs to exist? Are you solving a real problem? Are you filling a real gap in what we know? If you can't answer that with a confident yes, you've got to go back to the drawing board. Next, let's look at your purpose. Does that statement truly capture what you're setting out to do? It sounds simple, I know, but it's so easy for the purpose to kind of drift away from the problem you started with. It needs to be a direct, clear statement of your goal. And this is the big one. This is the final foundation check. Read all 3 of those pieces together out loud. Do your questions actually try to fulfill the purpose? And does that purpose directly address the problem? If there's any sort of disconnect, any little gap, you've found a crack in your foundation that needs fixing. Okay, our foundation is solid. What's next? Well, now we need to pick our architectural plans, the blueprint that's going to guide how we actually build this thing. Now, here's something that trips up a lot of people, the difference between methodology and methods. Think of it this way. Methodology is your big picture strategy, your whole philosophy. It's the why behind your choices. Methods, on the other hand, are the specific tools you're going to use, the what. They're your hammer, your nails, your screwdriver. This one's a bit of a zoom out question. You have to think about your own worldview as a researcher. For example, if you believe that reality is subjective and we all co-create it, then yeah, a qualitative methodology like ethnography totally makes sense. Your philosophy has to line up with your strategy. Now, let's bring it back to the practical. Is the design you picked, let's say it's a case study, is that the right vehicle to actually explore your research problem? A case study is perfect if you want to understand the deep experience of a small group. But if your goal is to generalize to a huge population, wrong tool for the job. And finally, do your specific tools fit the blueprint you've chosen? Let's say your design is a narrative inquiry where you're exploring life stories. Well, using in-depth interviews as a method makes perfect sense, but trying to use a multiple choice survey? That would be completely misaligned. Your what has to serve your how. Okay, so the foundation is poured, the blueprint is chosen. Now it's time to put up the scaffolding. You know, the support structure that's going to hold everything in place while we build. And this support system, it really comes from 2 main things. First, the literature review that gives you context by showing you what other builders in the field have already done. And second, the theoretical framework, which gives you the actual structure that's going to shape and hold your findings. Now listen, a great literature review is not just a book report on a bunch of other studies. It's an argument. You are actively using the existing literature to build a case, to prove to everyone that your study is absolutely necessary and significant. You're justifying the entire project. And what about that theoretical framework? It can't just be some fancy chapter you write and then forget about. No way. It should be the very lens you use to analyze your data. It's the set of buckets you'll use to organize your findings. It is a practical working tool. And here we are, the final stage of construction. All the heavy lifting is done. All the pieces are in place. Now we just have to make sure that the final product, your results, is the direct logical payoff for everything that came before it. Think of this as the final chain of dominoes. Your raw findings have to lead directly to your interpretations of what they mean. Those interpretations then let you draw clear conclusions. And finally, those conclusions form the solid base for your recommendations. Each step has to knock over the next one perfectly. This right here, this is the ultimate alignment check. The moment of truth. Go all the way back to your foundation. Look at those research questions you wrote. Now look at your findings. Do they actually answer the questions? If you asked how, do your findings explain how? There has to be a direct line. Okay, next up, are your conclusions standing on solid ground? You can't just make some giant sweeping conclusion based on one tiny piece of data. That's not trustworthy. Trust comes from making sure every single conclusion you draw is directly and strongly supported by your data. No leaps of faith allowed. And finally, the recommendations. These aren't just some good ideas you thought of at the end. They can't be an afterthought. Each recommendation you make, whether it's for future research or for practice, has to be a logical, practical application of the conclusions you just proved. It is the final link in the chain. So, you see, at the end of the day, that's really what alignment is all about. It's about making your research tell one single, coherent, powerful story. When every single piece, from the initial problem all the way to your final recommendations, is perfectly connected, you're not just presenting data, you're telling a convincing story. So the question to leave with is this: what story is your research telling?